Okay, today's video is on a recent article or recent interview of Jim Farley, CEO of Ford by Yahoo Finance. And boy, do I have some comments on that one. So short story long, Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, got on Yahoo Finance and stated that there was a major technician shortage in Ford dealerships across the country. And the first that I'd heard of this video was from the Car Care Nut, and I'm going to link that video so you can go watch that. So you can go watch that if you want. I'll just hang out here and wait, and then you can come back. So go ahead. I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, you're back. Okay, so here we go. Let's unpack this. So Jim Farley said that right now there's about a shortage of 6,000 Ford technicians in dealerships across the country. And he attributes it to a lack of young people wanting to get into the industry, and that's part of it, I must admit. If you look at guys and gals that grew up in the 70s and 80s, there was more of a tendency for people to work on their own cars. Cars were much simpler back then, and I worked on my own cars. How I got into the technician industry is fixing my own stuff first, and then this naturally led to a position at a dealership. So that's partially true. There's not as much attraction for young people to get into the industry, because if you open the hood on modern cars, there's just not much we can do. You know, fart pipes and wheels, and that's about it. So that's part of it. But there has been some attrition and some decisions made by manufacturers that have not helped the situation. So that's what I want to talk about today. And there's been a bazillion videos on YouTube about this, and I have some insight to this because I was a Ford dealer tech as I got into the business in 1986, and I did it until 1999. And I left because of flat rate. So this video is about flat rate, all about flat rate, what it was and what it is now. So part of the problem is indeed that there is a problem getting young people into the industry, and it goes even deeper than that, because if you take 10 people, let's say 10 young people, and you evaluate them on their ability to take something apart and put it back together, mechanical aptitude is not a universal skill. Not everybody has that skill. In fact, at a tech school that I used to teach at, before we would sign people up for student loans, we would have them take apart a simple mechanical puzzle and put it back together, and we would time them. And if they just blew that test, then we would suggest that they pick a different career, because mechanical aptitude is a skill. It doesn't exist in everyone. So not everybody has the mechanical aptitude. Not everybody has the puzzle-solving skills that you need to take cars apart, put them back together. So I like to say out of 10 people, 2 or 3 of them go on to become fabulous technicians. They have mechanical aptitude, they have the ability to solve puzzles, they become very good at what they do. 2 or 3 of them are mediocre technicians who just get by. And then 2 or 3 of them don't last in the industry because they don't have the necessary talent and skill to do a skilled trade like auto repair. So that's problem number one. Now, the other problem is that flat rate has seriously changed over the years. When I got into the business in 1986, the dealership that I worked at charged the customer $28 per hour flat rate. And flat rate is simply price by the job. In other words, if you have a yard and you hire a landscaper to mow that lawn, the landscaper will come, he will look at the lawn, and he will say, I will do it for this amount. I'll charge you $70 to mow your lawn. So we're not paying that landscaper by the hour. He's giving you a set price to do that job. Well, flat rate is the same thing. So for instance, let's say that you take your car to the shop and it needs an alternator. And when they work up the estimate for that alternator, they'll flip open a book or it'll go online. Nowadays, in the beginning, it was all in books. They'll look up the labor time to put that alternator on. Let's say it's 1.1 hours. So as when I got into the business in 1986, if the shop labor rate is $28 per hour, then we take $28 times 1.1, and that's the labor rate for that job. At the time, technicians would make half that. So the shop was charging $28 per hour. I was making $14 per hour, exactly half. Doesn't seem like a lot, but this is 1986. It was pretty good money back then. Technicians were all middle class. We could buy the vehicles that we were working on that were parked on the dealer lot. It was a pretty good living. So it was very fair. That changed. So we started to notice that in the late 80s and early 90s, the dealership would start to charge more money and the technician would not make half of the dealer rate anymore. That started to dwindle. So not only that, but at dealerships, we have what we call customer pay rate, which is customers walking on off the street with their car not covered under the factory warranty. They would pay the customer pay rate, which in this case, in 1986, this dealer that I started at was $28 per hour. Warranty time, what the manufacturer paid for the job that was covered under warranty, was less than that. So it would be like $26 or $23 per hour that we get paid to the dealership. What we got paid is the same. So if I got paid $14 per hour on a customer pay job, then I would also get paid $14 per hour on a warranty job. But the problem is that the warranty time was always less, mostly always less than the customer pay rate. For instance, if the customer pay time to do that alternator was 1.1 hours, then the warranty time might be 0.8 or 0.9. It would be less. And in the beginning, Ford used a very fair method to determine that time. What they would do is they would bring a new model into a shop at Ford, and they would have a technician with hand tools take that alternator off that car, put the alternator back on the car, and then they would do the job again, but this time around they would take a stopwatch and measure the time it took to do that job with a stopwatch with hand tools. So they would start the stopwatch, the technician would disconnect the battery, take the serpentine belt off, remove the alternator, put the alternator back on, put the serpentine belt back on, reconnect the battery. Click. And they would see that time. That would become the warranty time for that job. So as a technician back then, it was fairly easy to beat those times because remember, when they were determining that time, they were using hand tools. And we had at our disposal, we had impacts and air ratchets and, familiarity with the cars, so we could typically beat the time. So if that alternator warranty time was 0.8 of an hour, let's say, if you're really good, you could probably do that in about 0.6. And if you do that all day long, it was pretty easy to clock an 8-hour day, but flag 10 or 11. So very fair in the beginning. But then things started to change, as I mentioned. So what happened is the dealership rate would start to climb, but what was paid to the technician would be less than half of the dealership rate. It eventually settled somewhere around 1/4 of what the dealer charged the customer, and 1/5 is typically what technicians at the dealer make now. The other thing that happened is, at least with Ford, and most of the examples I'm going to give you today were Ford Motor Company because that's my experience. But in the late 80s, early 90s, more specifically the early to mid 90s, we started to notice that Ford started changing the warranty times. Now, they wouldn't do it on an existing model. For instance, I'll use head gaskets on a 3.8 liter Taurus as an example. So let's say 1995 Ford Taurus, a model that was around for many years. Under warranty, that job would pay about 8 hours. And we were doing lots of them because they had a problem with the gaskets back then. So to remove both cylinder heads on a Taurus, clean everything up, put new gaskets on, put it back together, under warranty, about 8 hours. Then in 1995, the Ford Windstar came out. The Windstar minivan was a very similar chassis with the same engine. The only difference was it was a van, so they tucked the engine up underneath the wiper tray. It was not as easy to do head gaskets on that car. We had to pull the wiper tray off to get enough room to get the rear cylinder head off. But yet, that same job, removing the heads and replacing the gaskets on a Ford Windstar, only paid 6.8 hours. So Taurus, 8 hours. Windstar, same engine, 6.8 hours. And we started to notice this across the board, starting at about 1993, 1994, 1995. So they started getting stingy on their times. And I asked questions. When I went up to Ford corporate to do training, I would ask them, why is this happening? And the answer that I got was that Ford was tightening their belts because they knew at the time we were in an economic bubble. It was the Reagan-Bush years after the Carter years. The economy was good. It was kind of booming. But the accountants at Ford, this is what I was told, the accountants at Ford knew that where there's a high, there has to be a low at some point. So they were tightening their belts, trying to pinch pennies, save money. One of the ways they were doing that is they were reducing the times on the warranty jobs on new models that were coming out. So, technician not making half of what the dealership charged the customer, problem. Ford starting to decrease the amount of time they would give to specific jobs under warranty. And then the third factor is that in 1998, Ford turned over their entire warranty time calculations to J.D. Powers, and J.D. Powers and Associates reevaluated all those times, and they slashed them 30-something%. The only thing they didn't touch was automatic transmissions. Ford specifically told them not to do that because at the time Ford was having transmission issues. They didn't want to lose any transmission technicians at all. So transmissions was left untouched, but everything else on the automobile, on average, slashed about 30%. And that's fine and good, but the problem is that when you're a tech at a dealer, you do mostly warranty work. And our checks dropped 30% in 1 year. So we went 30% lower on our paychecks after that occurrence. And I asked the dealership warranty administrator, is this fair and what can we do? And they responded to me and said, we're not responsible for the warranty times that Ford determines. And then when the Ford rep comes in, usually once a month, someone from corporate Ford would come into the dealership, and I ran him down and I asked him the same question. Why are you doing this? Do you think it's fair? And his response is, or was, we're not responsible for what your dealership pays you. So that was 1998, and since I wasn't getting an answer that was acceptable to me, I left the Ford dealer in 1998. At the end of 1998, or 99, at the end of 1999, I left the Ford dealership environment and I never looked back. And I went to independent repair shops, aftermarket independent repair shops, and within 3 years I had doubled my paycheck. So, if Jim Farley wants to really find out what's going on in his dealerships and why he can't keep technicians, he really needs to look. Yes, he needs to come up with an attractive draw for young people to get into the industry. But he also needs to really look on how technicians are paid, because flat rate is no longer the answer. Flat rate is no longer fair, and it needs to go away. After all, I've heard it said like this: there's a 30-30-30 rule in the automotive industry. Why would you spend $30,000 at a tech school, then have to buy $30,000 worth of tools just to make $30,000 in your first year, when you could go do food service in a restaurant and make more than that, literally? So there are many careers with almost no investment and no skilled trade required where you can go make more money than you can as an automotive technician. And I don't blame them for doing that. And honestly, I wouldn't recommend anybody, any young person, to get into auto repair. I'd say, no, don't do it. Go into medical, go into IT, stay away from auto repair. It's not a good industry anymore until flat rate goes away. When flat rate goes away and we start paying technicians fairly once again, then maybe, but not now. So those are my thoughts from someone that was in the industry and left the industry because of flat rate. If you went through something similar to dealership, please leave a comment down below. I would like to know. That's my experience from Ford. I'm sure many of you have other experiences as well. And hey, we'll see you next time.